Part 9. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida De. Chapter 81. Although the pilgrim said not to return, Gao Qiang couldn't help but ask. Well, what should I do if I accidentally use the reverse Kabbalistic Sephirah? Soon, there was a response from the pilgrims. The reverse Kabbalah source material will not return to the tree of life. After the assimilated particles are destroyed, the reverse Kabbalah source material can be taken back for purification. Gao Qiang twitched the corners of his mouth. It is indeed the method of a powerful force, it is really simple and crude. It would be quicker to kill a lord than to find a solution. Well, just now I was thinking about becoming the Holy Son, but now I am about to become the target of elimination. But when answering this question, the pilgrim seemed to realize something. As if he didn't want to make his words too absolute, the pilgrim quickly came up with a remedial plan. If we rely on the game characteristics of the war game, it may not be impossible to solve the problem of the anti-Kabbalah Sephirah. If you need it, we are encircling and suppressing the new source of matter in the second-level special battlefield. You can use the request for help to let you join our battlefield. New source of matter? Through the information he just saw, Gao Qiang knew what the pilgrim was talking about. The bearers of the Sephirah of the inverse Kabbalah do not appear out of thin air. The previous elf lord who represented the source of Kabbalah must be killed. Only among the elves newly raised by the Tree of Life can there be a slight possibility that the source of Kabbalah will appear. Now, the saints have attacked and killed Sephiroth I Crown and Sejanmavi Severe in high-level battlefields. The beauty, victory, glory, and foundation that represented Sephiroth 6 to 9 also fell one after another on different battlefields. These Sephiroth will reappear with the new elves, but they have the possibility of becoming the Sephiroth of the reverse Kabbalah. Gao Qiang has also seen one of the inverse Kabbalah Sephirahs. Sephiroth V's harsh rebellion turned into cruelty. The Sephiroth V used to represent the wrath of the Tree of Life, but now, this Sephiroth has been completely separated from the Kabbalah Tree of Life. As for the order for help, Gao Qiang did a casual search and found a large amount of information, and the price of the information was also quite cheap. Overall, this is a great way to get into the war game. Compared with entering the war game normally, the disadvantage of the call for help is that it requires consuming a rare item each time. And the lords who enter the game through the request for help will develop from the initial stage of the game, and it will be difficult to catch up with the first echelon. As for the advantage, it is that you can choose the battlefield you want to join, rather than doing it randomly at the will of the war game. There are very few times when an individual needs to use a call for help. This is the prerogative of the major forces. Often, in order to win a war game, the major forces will continuously invest more follow-up forces. But generally, unless it is a last resort or a high-level battlefield that requires a long time of fighting, few people will use a call for help item in a low-level battlefield. The saint's thoughts are actually very obvious. Gao Qiang doesn't have much time left, so he might as well keep it under his nose. If Gao Qiang can solve the trouble of the anti-Kabbalah Sephirah, the saint will naturally keep his promise and give Gao Qiang the right to choose to become the Son of God. If Gao Qiang cannot solve the problem and is assimilated into a part of the Tree of Life, the saints can directly solve Gao Qiang and cut off any hidden dangers related to the Tree of Life. But this war? Gao Qiang looked thoughtfully at the subsequent war messages sent by the pilgrims. Feudal era, mythical era. Introduction, variation of the feudal era. Here, any existence that is enshrined will be called a god. 8 million of these gods are at war with each other, and the chants of holy war ring out day and night, until there is only one voice left in the world, and holy war will last forever. This second-level battlefield is completely consistent with the location of the territory type that Gao Qiang saw previously in Beishitang. The territory that has been ranked among the top 100 new types in recent times by know-how should come from this battlefield. The feudal era was of no use to Gao Qiang's current situation. but the word myth made Gao Qiang vaguely feel that this era might be completely different from the feudalism he knew. If I accept the request for help, what should I do next? Gao Qiang asked the pilgrim directly. It's very simple. The saints can arrange for the Lord who has the rare item of the request for help to invite you at any time. But before that, you need to apply to the forces in your location for a land that is prepared to deal with failure. It is not allowed to enter war games in cities or buildings. The saints do not want to cause unnecessary trouble. It seemed that he was aware of Gao Qiang's thought fluctuations. Next to the search engine of the smart hub, a question box suddenly appeared. Should you apply for war preparation land from the highest university? Gao Qiang looked at the sudden prompt from the Wisdom Center and clicked it with one hand. Suddenly the platform under his feet glowed red. Su Yukai, who had been yawning next to Gao Qiang, became energetic. Ah. What happened? Brother Qiang, have you finished searching your things? Su Yukai was already a little drowsy when he started searching for things like Kabbalah and Kabbalah from Gao Qiang. If it weren't for the sudden red light, Su Yukai wouldn't have realized what Gao Qiang had just done. As for the frame in front of him, Su Yukai thought about the option Gao Qiang had just chosen, and subconsciously clicked on the same choice. As a result, when he turned around, he saw Gao Qiang looking at him with a strange expression. That's it for you, Gao Qiang couldn't help but ask. Yes, didn't you click on this option when I saw Brother Qiang just now? That is the option to apply for war preparation land, Gao Qiang reminded with a dark face. After Su Yukai reacted, he suddenly realized that something was not right. Brother Qiang, it's only been a day since you came out, and you want to go back again. Gao Qiang nodded, I have some important things to do, so you don't have to go and take risks. After calculating the time, Gao Qiang continued. If you want to take the academy route, I guess I will be back by the time you complete your second grade assessment. Su Yukai hesitated for a few seconds and suddenly patted Gao Qiang on the shoulder. Although I don't know what happened, it doesn't matter which one of us brothers follows the other, so it doesn't matter if we don't get into the academy. I wonder if it was the Stone Age that gave Su Yukai great confidence. At this moment, Su Yukai patted his chest again. Believe me, brother, you and I, brothers, come together, no matter what war games he plays, just kill indiscriminately. Gao Qiang looked at Su Yukai's appearance and smiled. Whatever. Anyway, according to the information about the request for help that was just found. Once the request for help is released, it can be responded to by many lords, many of whom are wealthy but not many. What's more, this was Su Yukai's own wish, and Gao Qiang did not stop him. After all, he had to enter sooner or later, so there was no harm in entering the same game as himself. As for what Su Yukai just said, Gao Qiang naturally responded with a smile. Take Brother Qiang away, just lie down. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 82. What Gao Qiang didn't expect was that, just after leaving the Wisdom Center, he and Su Yukai were blocked by Mr. M at the door. You want to participate in the war game? Mr. M looked at the faces of Gao Qiang and Su Yukai. He was not unfamiliar with the expressions of these two smiling faces, as they had just given him a warning not long ago. Mr. M originally planned to ignore them for a while. Unexpectedly, Gao Qiang gave him a big one after just a few hours. As the counselor of Gao Qiang's class, Mr. M naturally knew that Gao Qiang had just applied for the land required for participating in the war game. In fact, it was not just them. Long Xianyao had left here and participated in the war game long before Gao Qiang applied. Mr. M did not quite understand this behavior. As a force in the human camp that directly reached the infinite battlefield, even if it was only a lower-level institution of the academy. This side also has a large number of equipment and resources to use, and even has the right to use infinite computers such as high prisms and Omega. In Mr. M's opinion, Gao-Jiang and others have just reached adulthood, so even if they only spend half a year in the academy to lay a solid foundation, even if they do not join the academy in the future, they will have a huge advantage when they join any force or enter the war game as a lone lord. How can a person who can only talk about war on paper beat 10 straw bags who can't even talk about war on paper? Or has one victory blinded their eyes? Looking at Gao-Jiang's expression without any sense of crisis, Mr. M wanted to persuade him again. No need to persuade him anymore. Gao-Jiang stopped Mr. M. He could understand what Mr. M was thinking, and the Supreme Academy was not as bad as Long Xianyeo's self-biased opinion. But Gao-Jiang has fixed his own territory type, and most of the teachings and simulations about development in the Supreme Academy are completely useless to Gao-Jiang. It can be said that most of the knowledge taught here is not applicable to Gao-Jiang. If there is no risk of being assimilated by the Tree of Life, Gao-Jiang may temporarily try to go to the academy. But now, let's wait until he solves the risk. Mr. M sighed slightly and stopped trying to persuade them. As a counselor, he actually did not interfere with the students' right to choose. After Gao-Jiang and Su Yukai left, Mr. M stood in front of the Smart Hub and smiled bitterly. What's the big deal? He has dozens of classes under his charge, and he has never encountered a situation where half of the students were reduced on the first day of school. If Mr. M were to say it in his own words, the students in this class are simply a mess, self-centered, and impetuous, without any academic style. But how did they win against themselves? When he thought of this, Mr. M couldn't help but start to have a headache again. On the other side, according to the AI prompts of the highest institution, Gao-Jiang and Su Yukai stood on 2 discs respectively. This is a short-distance movement method provided by the highest institution. The suspended flying disc can detach from the facility by itself and carry people to the large wasteland outside the highest institution. At the same time, the highest institution will automatically calculate the land weight of the Lord Representative to confirm the parking position of the flying disc. After several rounds of the flying disc, the entry positions of Gao-Jiang and Su Yukai were finally determined. At this time, Gao-Jiang also expressed to the pilgrim that he was ready. Without saying anything more nonsense, the pilgrim sent an invitation from the request for help. That was the coordinate address of a war game. Just copy these contents to the war game, and you can join the battlefield where the Saints organization is located as a responder to the request for help. In addition, there is also information about this battlefield. In this battlefield that seems to be only in the feudal era, there are a large number of native gods and neutral units. In addition to the territory talent, each lord needs to choose the god or pantheon he believes in. And because of the game variant, in this game, the race is no longer a fixed hostile target, but changes into various pantheons. But that is only the information on the surface. Few people try to achieve religious victory. Secretly, various races are competing for the ownership of the major pantheons. Because of the victory of domination, whoever first merges most pantheons into his control will win the real victory of this game. Looking at the intelligence sent by the pilgrims, Gao-Jiang couldn't help but sigh that big forces do have the advantages of big forces. This war game has not yet entered, and the bottom of this war game is about to be revealed by the Saints. According to the Saints, when entering this game, there are some choices that are very good for Gao-Jiang. For example, the Holy Light God system dominated by the God of Light, the 5 Elements God system dominated by the 5 gods of water and fire. Or the faith of a single god such as the Sun God and the Moon Goddess, which are currently dominated by the Saints. In this war, the function of God is to bestow blessings. The larger the God system, the harder it is to get the favor of God, but the higher the bonus will be. The opposite is true for gods with sparse beliefs. It is extremely easy to get blessings by believing in them, but the bonus will be greatly reduced. Looking at the series of god options in the intelligence, such as the broom god and the basin god, Gao Qiang knew that the so-called 8 million gods might not be an exaggeration. Because the god he believed in needed to make a decision before entering the war game, Gao Qiang, who suffered from choice phobia, simply gave the power of choice to Suyukai. Suyukai also chose the holy light system without saying a word. And the reason why he chose this pantheon is: Brother Qiang, do you believe in light? Seeing Suyukai's serious and funny expression, Gao Qiang didn't hesitate about which god to choose. Anyway, his real trump card has always been his territorial talent. As for the strength of the divine system, it is just an addition. As Gao Qiang and Suyukai accepted the order for help from the saints, the great power of the past came again. The two people's vision flew towards the sky, and when they stabilized again, they were already standing above a continent. Welcome to War Game. Welcome to the second level battlefield 39,741. Your territory talent is fixed to Fallen Empire. At this moment, a majestic figure belonging to the Holy Light appeared in front of Gao Qiang, and then shattered. Due to the fifth effect, you failed to be born into the Holy Light God system and failed to join the Holy Light God system. Reevaluating your beliefs. The next moment, the phantoms of the gods who had been worshipped by Gao Qiang during the exam appeared in front of Gao Qiang. The Jade Emperor, Tathagata Buddha, God, the indescribable God. Because your beliefs are too egalitarian and chaotic, you cannot judge the highest belief goals, perform overall integration, and breed new gods. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 83. Fusion completed. The name of the god you worship is, data deleted. Data deleted. Mythology, according to legend, the god you worship is the ruler of the old days. He created the world in 7 days after reincarnation for thousands of years. He ascended the throne of the 3 realms with 9 merits. Features: remnant power of the old days, power of creation, cannot be looked at directly, salvation of all living beings, kindness. This god. Although Gao Qiang knew that in this war game, the gods were just a background board. But the god created by the fusion of his messy beliefs seemed a bit too weird. First of all, what the hell is this god, data deleted? Who doesn't even know the name of the god they believe in? But the war game chooses gods according to the highest belief of the individual. According to the judgment of the war game, this is the god that Gao Qiang believes in the most. And because no one believes in it, data deleted perfectly fits the characteristics of Gao Qiang's territory. Therefore, just like the last time, Gao Qiang only felt his feet slipping, and the whole person fell towards the continent below. After getting familiar with the unreasonable characteristics of war games, Gao Qiang did not scream again. At this moment, at the location of a ruin of the god's court on the continent, a white-bearded traveler stopped. Looking at the ruins of the god's court covered with moss, which had obviously been uninhabited for a long time, the traveler could not help but sigh. Such ruins are not rare in this world. New gods' courts are born all the time, and old gods' courts may be overthrown at any time. In this world, except for war, nothing is eternal, even the gods are the same. At this moment, in the originally dead and silent ruins, a rustling sound suddenly came out. The old traveler's heart tightened, and he looked in the direction where the sound came from. I saw a heavy knight wearing iron armor emerging from the moss, wandering aimlessly among the long-abandoned ruins. It was pitch black under his helmet, and his face could not be seen from the outside. But at this moment, the traveler suddenly thought of a legend he had heard when he was a child, and he didn't even notice that the wooden stick in his hand had fallen. That was a legend his mother told him when he was young. They once stood at the top of the god's court, holding the power of killing everything. No one can disobey their will, and their will be placed on the same level as God's will. Until one day, they didn't know what they saw, and suddenly sealed all their Bibles, and never turned a page again. Later generations never dared to offend their bottom line until they were finally completely forgotten by most people. And those who still remember them call them stagnation. Holy power. The old traveler couldn't help but murmured. They appeared. Wall of size. Citizens, 21,060 people. Warriors, 1,000 knights of the church, 200 witch hunters. Defense buildings, 20 kilometers of the forgotten river, 10 square kilometers of fire and thunder array. Production building, none. Miracle building, old shrine. At this moment, Gaoqiang has descended into his own territory. Compared to the Stone Age, for some reason, the territory where Gaoqiang is now looks quite dilapidated. There are no visible defense measures, and the people written on the panel are nowhere to be found. In this territory, there are only the vicissitudes and silence revealed between the ruins. Indistinctly, Gaoqiang can still see the former glory of this land from the runes written on the broken walls. At this time, the pilgrim and Suyukai sent questioning messages almost at the same time. Wushuan General, Brother Qiang, where are you? Forget it, I tell you, this blessing of the Holy Light God system is really high. Then Suyukai showed Gaoqiang the blessing he had just received. Because you firmly believe in the power of light, all your people will obtain the characteristic, Holy Light Blessing. Holy Light Blessing, you can be immune to lethal damage once, and then this characteristic will be invalid. So this is the power of blessing. It should be because Suyukai's initial territory was very small that some kind of event was triggered at the beginning. And himself. After chatting with Suyukai for a while, Gaoqiang turned around and looked at the territory. Sometimes a large territory is not a good thing. This makes him have to explore his territory first every time he enters a war game, just like treasure hunting. Gaoqiang now has to determine his location, and at the same time, he has to contact the special existence of this era, God. Lord. At this moment, a surprised voice appeared behind Gaoqiang. Gaoqiang subconsciously turned around and showed a stunned expression. Shasha. Lord. Shasha pounced and threw Gaoqiang to the ground, while rubbing her face against Gaoqiang's chest. By the way, there are more than me. As Shasha spoke, several familiar figures walked out of the abandoned houses around. Juluo, Hayukan, Lei Heshuo and other people Gaoqiang was familiar with appeared here. Juluo frowned and fanned the dust that flew up when he opened the door. It's been a long time since I cleaned it. I have to do a thorough cleaning later, cough cough. What are you doing? Gaoqiang looked at everyone and then opened their attribute panels. Compared with the Stone Age, everyone's attribute panels have changed greatly. Shasha. Occupation, Stagnation Saint. Loyalty, 100. Stagnation Saint. Introduction, she has never picked up a Bible, so you don't have to expect her to recite any word in the Bible. On the other side, Juluo came close to Gaoqiang and unceremoniously took Shasha off Gaoqiang. Then Juluo narrowed his eyes and looked at the ruins around him. A very familiar place, just like we grew up here since childhood. But Juluo paused, then said nothing, but smiled and looked at Gaoqiang on the side. The Lord's reward chose us, which is greedy enough. Gaoqiang pinched his cheek and turned his face away. He was completely accustomed to Juluo's shocking words from time to time. He opened Juluo's panel casually and saw that Juluo's identity had indeed changed. In the feudal era, Juluo's identity changed to a God's blessing servant. God's blessing servant, this unit may produce double or even multiple resources when mining any basic resources. Any basic resource may produce multiple resources. Gaoqiang narrowed his eyes. The war game only has the characteristics of a certain game. Planting may be blessed under the rules of the war game, but jobs like logging and quarrying are still more realistic. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 84. If logging and quarrying can also produce multiple resources, doesn't that mean Julugo has the ability to create things in the void? As for Julugo, Hayukin's position has not changed much, but he has returned to the identity of a corrupted material officer. At this moment, Hayukin was wearing a wolfskin coat decorated with gorgeous gold threads, and yawned slowly. I'll lie down for a while, and call me when it's time to eat. After that, Hayukin returned to the hut. Lei Heshuo Gaoqiang, who was standing next to him, also took a look. His identity was not the leader of the Knights of the Church as Gaoqiang expected, but became the same as Julugo. Now Lei Heshuo had nothing to do standing there, and after laughing a few times, he turned around and left. Soon, only Shasha and Julugo were left by Gaoqiang's side. Is Grandma Zuzu not here? Gaoqiang just looked around and didn't see Zuzu, so he simply asked Julugo. Grandma, maybe I'll see you again in the future. Julugo shrugged and said meaningfully. At the same time, Julugo grabbed the running Sasha. While pulling Sasha's collar, he asked Gaoqiang. Next, Lord, do you want to go to the Lord's Hall first, or go to the shrine? Compared to the unreliable Sasha, Julugo perfectly integrated into the identity of the initial guide of the territory. The shrine. Gaoqiang has not forgotten the purpose of his coming here. The thread of the Kabbalah tree of life is like a sword of Damocles hanging over his head. Although Gaoqiang has not yet felt the impact of his consciousness or the traces of being assimilated by the tree of life, it is uncertain when this time bomb will explode. And it is obvious that in this war game, the one who can solve this problem must not be the mortals whose technological level has not even broken through the Middle Ages, but those gods who exist as background boards. Please follow me. Julugo led Gaoqiang to the depths of the territory. Along the way, Gaoqiang met the knights who protected the religion described in the panel. Although these knights are still tall and strong, they seem to be less intimidating than the Tyrannosaurus knights of the Stone Age. If there is anything special about them, Gaoqiang felt a strong sense of threat from them, just like the feeling of a living creature facing a natural enemy. And on the panel of the Knight of the Guardian, there is only a lonely but extremely strange feature. Holy Proverbs, these pious knights will only die after the gods they believe in. After. Gaoqiang wiped his eyes to make sure he was not dazzled. Then he pulled the corner of his mouth. If he understood the meaning of this feature correctly, these Knights of the Guardian will only die after the death of the god named Data Delete. So where did the technology tree of this war game go? Gaoqiang opened the technology interface and took a look. As he expected, the technology tree in front of him was forcibly split into two main trunks. In the past, the technology tree should be a towering tree that goes vertically upwards, and all medical, military, and other technologies are branches on this trunk. But this era is different. Because it is a mythological era that evolved from the feudal era. This era naturally has two completely different technology trees, one called Mystery, and the other is the technology that Gaoqiang is familiar with. But as expected, Gaoqiang has completely top-level technology on both technology trees. Even the description of Gaoqiang's territory type has some minor changes. Fallen Empire, stagnation of holy power. We're here. Julugo's voice brought Gaoqiang back to his senses. At this moment, under Julugo's guidance, Gaoqiang has stood in front of a seemingly abandoned temple. The heavy stone door is completely fixed by vines, and moss is also spread all over the corners of this temple. Miracle Building, Old Shrine. Effect 1, the power of miracles shrouds the shrine. It seems that the gods in the shrine will be more willing to bless you. Blessing rate add 100%. Effect 2, when the old shrine is completely destroyed, the natural disasters of the past will return to this continent with power that the gods cannot match. This miracle building will not lead to the awakening of the fallen empire? Gao Qiang looked at the description of the old shrine and frowned slightly. This is not good news for Gao Qiang. The gap in strength between the awakening empire and the fallen empire has been fully reflected in the Stone Age. If the fallen empire is the strongest in this era, then the awakening empire is able to match the stronger ones beyond this era. The destruction of the miracle building is the simplest and crudest way to get the fallen empire out of its silence. If the miracle building is no longer regarded as the reverse scale of the fallen empire, Gao Qiang will have to find other ways to awaken the empire. But it's useless to think so much now. Let's meet the god named Data Delete first. Gao Qiang is actually very curious about what kind of surprises this existence that combines many great gods in his mind will bring to him. At Gao Qiang's signal, Zhuoluo stepped forward and stretched out his hand to press down on a stone slab in front of the shrine. Boom! The stone door exploded with a rumbling sound, and the vines were torn off by the stone door, and a large amount of dust flew up. But at this time, what emerged from the stone gate was not a dilapidated scene. Behind the stone gate was a magnificent scene. Zhuoluo did not seem surprised and continued to walk towards the shrine with Gao Qiang. After a few steps, Zhuoluo suddenly stopped. Because right in front of the three of them, a figure in a monk's robe was walking slowly towards them. It seemed that his face was a little pale because he had not been exposed to the sun for many years. But it did not prevent him from bowing gently to Gao Qiang. Old shrine, welcome the Lord. At this moment, Gao Qiang opened the other party's personal panel. Zinke. Occupation, High Priest. High Priest, they serve the gods all day long and have powerful powers that ordinary people cannot imagine. 10,000 years have passed, and this is the first time that the shrine has seen the sun from the outside world. Zinke looked at the sun behind Gao Qiang and closed his eyes in the dazzling sun. From his expression and tone, it was hard to tell whether he was resentful or simply sighing. After a while, as the sun shone, Zinke's face looked much better. Only then did Zinke turn around. I know that the Lord will not come here for no reason. Next, I will guide the Lord to see him. The ruler from the old days who we believe in. After that, Zinke took over Zhuoluo's guidance task. Looking at Zinke's back as he turned around naturally, Shasha couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Why are you pretending? Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 85. Following Zinke's steps, Gao Qiang found that the temple had always been cleaned. At least the distance between the gate and the statue was spotless. And the dirtiest place was the library in the temple. It was covered with thick dust, and the spider webs everywhere made people subconsciously unwilling to get close. Seeing Gao Qiang attracted by the library, Zinke explained casually, it has been too long since anyone needed to read the scriptures of God. Over the years, no one has ever moved, nor has anyone wanted to move those books. Perhaps, even we have forgotten why we believed in God in the first place, and why we abandoned our faith in God. While speaking, everyone had walked to the deepest part of the temple. Here, Gao Qiang saw a strange statue. On the lotus that stretched like an octopus, there was a dragon chair carved with 9 dragons. And he who sat on the dragon chair was wearing a holy robe made of pure gold, holding a flower and smiling in the direction of the outside gate. If it weren't for the completely hollowed out eyes on the statue, this statue would not be considered majestic or weird. But now, just looking at the statue would give people a chilling illusion. Dong, dong. Zinke walked up and knocked twice on the statue of the god. Guests are coming, Zinke said softly. Then, with the sound of metal clicking, Gao Qiang suddenly discovered that every pillar used to support the shrine from collapsing had opened a weird eyeball made of pure gold. Mortal, since you see the gods, why don't you worship? A majestic voice was completely interrupted by Zinke knocking on the golden body before it was finished. Sasha's brows were already frowning at this moment, and she was about to speak. Zinke smiled at Gao Qiang embarrassedly, and then hid behind the statue. Wrong, it's not this sentence. Although the voice was very low, Gao Qiang could hear most of it because it was a closed space. Which sentence is that? Another voice he had never heard asked in a low voice. That sentence, Xin Qi couldn't help but increase the volume a little, and then covered his mouth instantly. He looked at Gao Qiang embarrassedly, and then shrank back again. Not long after, the voice of the statue came again. My power is far beyond the scope of your understanding. Offer flesh and blood and sacrifice, and I will share everything with you. Clang. A crisp sound came from behind the statue. Wrong, wrong, it's not this sentence, it's that sentence. Which sentence is that sentence? Oh, I understand. Suddenly, the voice of the statue changed again. This time, the statue no longer used a language known to humans, but an ancient and profound language. His words seemed to contain some knowledge that mortals could not understand. Only at the first moment of the words. There were constant reminders of war games in front of Gao Qiang. You successfully summoned the god you believe in. The characteristics of the anti-Kabbalah source are triggered, and the god you summon will gain cruel characteristics. You listen to the teachings of data deleted and gain special attribute SAN value. When the SAN value is lower than 80%, you will gain a negative mental buff. When it is lower than 50%, you will fall into a crazy state, and when it is lower than 30%, you will mutate. Your SAN value -3, -4, -1. When the SAN value is lower than 80, you fall into a state of mental depression. Under the influence of mental depression, the anti-Kabbalah source stops growing. At this time, a black tear dripped from the corner of the statue's eye. Zinke was quick to catch the tear, then jumped into the statue's hand and tiptoed to stuff the tear back. How many times have I told you not to scare people? If God scares people, they will die. After being scolded by Xin Qi, the ancient and deep voice stopped abruptly. Then Gao Qiang saw that his SAN value was gradually recovering at a very slow speed. In less than a minute, the SAN value attribute that suddenly appeared had almost fallen below 50%. Gao Qiang was sure of this. In the information given by the saints, in this war game, there was absolutely no such weird thing as SAN value. But fortunately it stopped. Gao Qiang could hardly imagine what kind of scene he would be in after falling into a crazy state. It was also a blessing in disguise. Because of his mental depression, the anti-Kabbalah essence actually stopped eroding him. Although he didn't know the principle, he should not have to worry about the assimilation of the tree of life before his mental recovery. And what happened now made Gao Qiang firm up in an idea. In this war game, there should really be a way to solve the threat of the anti-Kabbalah essence. At this time, looking at the statue that was still being taught by Zinke, Gao Qiang suddenly opened the other party's attribute panel for some reason. Data deleted. Profession, God. Features, remnant of the past, power of creation, cannot be looked at directly, universal salvation, kindness, cruelty. Not to mention that the two completely conflicting terms of kindness and cruelty can actually be encountered together. What surprised Gao Qiang even more was this god named Data Deleted was actually considered his subject. No wonder Zinke, the great priest, dared to reprimand his god without hesitation. According to what Gao Qiang felt in the Stone Age, the relationship between superiors and subordinates in the fallen empire was unique. Data Deleted it was no more noble than other subjects. Suddenly, Gao Qiang suddenly realized that something was pulling his trouser leg. Sasha, stop it, Gao Qiang said subconsciously. I didn't do anything. Sasha's voice came from the other side. Gao Qiang looked at her. Sasha opened her big eyes innocently and blinked at Gao Qiang. Anjulio was also standing beside Sasha. If everyone was not here. Gao Qiang looked down at his feet with a dark face. Somehow, a sticky black tentacle came out from the cracks in the floor tiles and pulled Gao Qiang's trouser leg aggrievedly. Seeing Gao Qiang noticed him, the tentacle loosened his trouser pocket and pointed at Zinke, who was still reprimanding the statue. Then he pulled Gao Qiang's trouser leg aggrievedly. "You mean, you want me to persuade Zinke?" Gao Qiang asked in surprise. As if he understood this, the tentacle rubbed Gao Qiang's calf happily. Okay, I'll persuade him, you move away first." Under Juluo's smiling eyes, Gao Qiang pulled his leg back from the tentacle. Gao Qiang also had some guesses about the identity of this tentacle, perhaps it was his god who was considered a subject. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 86. Gao Qiang would still do what he promised. After pulling his legs out of the tentacles, Gao Qiang still spoke a few good words for him. Xin Qi didn't mean to hold on. In the end, he just patted the statue's golden body with regret. "I said that sentence, do you understand that sentence?" The statue was silent now, and the tentacles that had just emerged from the cracks in the floor tiles were also retracted. It seemed that he couldn't think of what to say at all, so he chose to pretend to be dead to escape reality. Xin Qi slapped himself in the face and sighed heavily. Then he put on the serious expression at the beginning and turned around. "Lord, you came to the old shrine to get the blessing of that god." Gao Qiang glanced at the sand value in the attribute panel that was about to drop by 50%, and then looked at the serious Xin Qi. Then he shook his head heavily. "It's enough to solve the problem of the reverse Kabbalah source for the time being. As for the blessing of data delete, he really didn't dare to accept it." However, just when Gao Qiang shook his head to refuse, several tentacles came out from the cracks in the ground and pulled Gao Qiang's clothes with grievance. Gao Qiang turned his head to look at Zinke. Zinke smiled embarrassedly and explained to Gao Qiang, "Actually, he has no ill intentions. I have been beating around the bush for so long, just want to say something to you. Should I feed him something to eat?" Gao Qiang's mouth twitched. Thinking of the territorial characteristics of the fallen empire and the mossy gate of the old temple. Could it be that this god has not received offerings for tens of thousands of years? No matter how bad other gods are, they will only go hungry for 3 days and 9 meals. This data delete has been forgotten for tens of thousands of years. I am afraid that if it doesn't open the door again, he has forgotten what offerings mean. He is very obedient and easy to feed. As long as you give some offerings, the blessing will definitely be great, Zinke said, rubbing his hands. At this point, Gao Qiang had no reason to refuse. But he still asked cautiously, "This so-called offering, won't it be cannibalism?" "That's not the case." Zinke waved his hand. "Our God is not an evil God. As an existence that has accumulated 9 merits in the reincarnation of thousands of lives, it is definitely a righteous God among righteous gods." Gao Qiang silently looked at the extra cruel word in the characteristics of the gods. He swallowed the words. "There are 9,991 lives left." At this time, Juluo suddenly spoke. "It's okay, if you want, I can help you arrange these things. The banquet for offering to the gods, I happen to know how to cook a little." "Banquet?" Sasha turned her head away instantly. "Can I eat too, chef sister?" Ignoring Sasha's usual greed, Gao Qiang nodded to Juluo. After Juluo agreed, he quickly left the old shrine and soon came back with a few waiters and a few chickens. However, at this moment, the people in the shrine seemed to hear some strange conversation. "Hongguan, what do you think this human woman is doing with us?" "How should I know? Maybe she wants to give us a bath. Look, the water is almost ready." Gao Qiang looked to the side. Under Juluo's command, the waiter had already set up a simple stove in the shrine. Next to the stove, the chopping board and seasonings were all available. Human women are stupid. Why do they bring knives to take a bath? Looking at Julugo's increasingly dark face, Gao Qiang seemed to realize something after confirming that he and his subjects could hear the chickens talking. Open the interface of the war game. This war game, as a variant of the feudal era, has many and diverse participating races. In addition to old friends, the elves, and the undead, Gao Qiang also saw some relatively new races. For example, the Shadow Tribe, the Minotaur, and the like. But in addition to those guys, chickens are also a race participating in this war. No wonder they can understand chickens talking. Just when Julugo finished sharpening the knife and was about to shave the chicken, the big rooster who had just spoken finally noticed something was wrong. You human woman are so cruel, you actually want to shave my hair. Julugo took another big rooster from the waiter with a dark face and smiled, and pressed it on the chopping board. The chicken head fell to the ground with the knife. After a few seconds of silence, the big rooster just now let out a shrill scream. Ah, kill the chicken. Wait, what are you going to do? Soon, it found that Julugo was already walking towards it with a knife. The great chicken god will not let you go. What, divine chicken, where is the divine chicken? Shasha, who had just run off to play somewhere, immediately jumped out when she heard the word chicken god. So did the divine chicken join our luxurious dinner today? Shasha asked Gao Qiang expectantly. Gao Qiang rubbed his nose. Not yet, but there is hope in the future. As the smoke from cooking slowly rose in the temple, a strong aroma soon filled the enclosed space. Xin Qi smelled the aroma and swallowed his saliva. Although he was the high priest, he could not remember how long he had not eaten. Now, it was the aroma of food. Then, this is the feast for the gods that I prepared. Julugo wiped off the small drops of water vapor condensed on his head and pointed to the dishes that had been prepared. 8 treasure rooster soup, white-cut chicken, mouth-watering chicken, braised chestnut chicken. Just as Julugo was still announcing the names of the dishes, a hand had already grabbed the chicken leg. Julugo naturally gave Shasha a slap on the head without hesitation. Then he smiled and said, "Be good, we will go back to the Lord's Hall to eat in the evening." Woo! As Shasha squatted aside with her head in her arms. Then, with Zinki's witness, several people placed the tribute in front of the statue. The next moment, terrifying tentacles burst out from the statue's eye sockets, sweeping away the tribute on the table at lightning speed. At the same time, he did not forget to break off 2 chicken legs and handed them to Shasha and Zinki respectively. Even Gao Qiang was inexplicably given a portion of chicken wings. Of course, most of the chicken naturally went into the god's own stomach. Your offerings please your gods. Your gods have bestowed upon you the highest level of blessing, the old ones. The old ones, data deleted SIs are forever fixed on you, and the power of the old ones will arrive as expected at any time. Note, killing the old ones will anger data deleted and greatly increase the progress of the natural disaster. Gao Qiang casually walked around the temple twice, seemingly unaware of the improvements that the old ones brought to him. The basic attributes were not increased, and the mysterious power seemed to be absent. Xin Qi casually glanced at the back of Gao Qiang's head. In fact, what Gao Qiang could not see was a virtual big eye that was following Gao Qiang's head all the time. God was already watching him. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 87. After searching around, Gao Qiang really didn't feel that the blessing had any unique effect other than the slower recovery speed of sanity. Sasha already yawned out of boredom. Wiping the oily corners of her mouth, Shasha shook Gao Qiang's arm. Lord, when will we have dinner? Gao Qiang looked at Shasha funnily and handed over the uneaten chicken wings. Let's leave now, can we leave now? Receiving God's blessing is an unexpected gain. Apart from this, Gao Qiang has not yet discovered any other uses for the shrine. In addition to the old shrines, there are many places in the territory that he has not visited. Of course, after temporarily solving the problem of the reverse Kabbalah Sephirah, the next primary goal is to confirm one's position. When leaving, Zinke smiled and waved to Gao Qiang. "Welcome to come again next time." Even behind the statue, several indescribable tentacles stretched out and waved towards Gao Qiang. But this scene always gives people an inexplicable sense of absurdity. Your san value -1. Shaking his head, Gao Qiang quickened his pace and left the temple. With data expunged, eating and saying goodbye, Gao Qiang's sanity level, which he had just recovered, dropped again. Just one look at it starts to lower the sanity level, and I don't dare to stay here any longer. I really don't know how Zinke manages to hang out with him all day long. By the time Gao Qiang arrived at the Lord's Hall, the place had already been tidied up. Although some traces of age can still be seen on the exterior walls, the interior is completely new. Because he knew what Gao Qiang wanted to see, Zhuoluo had already ordered the waiter to place the map of this world in the most conspicuous position, at the feet of everyone. Because it is a second-level war world, the area of this continent far exceeds that of the Stone Age. Just a detailed map covers the entire floor of the Lord's Hall. "You and Shasha take a look first, and I'll prepare today's dinner." After that, Zhuoluo stood up to say goodbye and rushed towards the kitchen at the back of the Lord's Hall. Seeing Zhuoluo walking away, Shasha chuckled and approached Gao Qiang. He looked around and then whispered, "Lord, let's go catch the magic chicken and eat it." Gao Qiang raised his eyebrows. Ever since she heard something about the cock god from those big roosters, Shasha really couldn't forget her body. "It's not that far after all." Sasha jumped up and stood in a corner of the map. He pointed to the position below him. "Look, this is our location. If we are fast enough, it won't take 3 hours to go back and forth." Gao Qiang looked along the position of Shasha's feet. On the map, Gao Qiang's location was just a ruin, with no forces marked on it. However, with Shasha's guidance and the information given by the pilgrims before entering, Gao Qiang finally confirmed his position on this map. Then the corner of Gao Qiang's mouth twitched. His birth point was really too unique. Because of the order for help, all races had been developing for a period of time before Gao Qiang entered this war game. In the east of the world, the holy light, sun, bright moon, and other pantheons actually controlled by the saints have formed an unbreakable alliance. Since the saints alone control several top-level gods, the rest of the individual players also have many smaller gods. In this war, human beings actually have a huge advantage. Under pressure, various races quickly abandoned the hostility between gods and formed alliances based on race. For example, the elves control the life god system, the victory god system, and the beauty god. Or the dark pantheon of Shadow Clan, the deceitful god. Or the god of war and various ancestral gods united by the Turin. The location in the east has been carved up by various races, like a palette. Therefore, according to the characteristics of the fallen empire, Gao Qiang was directly pushed to the most western place where no one can shoot. The number of war game players here is not only small, but also of poor quality. They are even inferior to the native indigenous people. It's like the chicken clan, animals in the eyes of humans, stay here. After all, even if they are protected by the gods, they have no power to fight against the major gods in the east. In addition to the lack of shit, this place is even a place of chaos, where believers of all kinds of monsters, ghosts, and snakes are shouting and killing. It's not as stable and peaceful as the major gods in the east. Suddenly, Gao Qiang suddenly felt a palpitation in his heart, as if he was being stared at by something. Is this feeling brought about by the reverse Kabbalah Sephirah? Gao Qiang frowned. It seemed that after the anti-Kabbalah source material stopped assimilating himself, the attributes he carried were still there. Just like now, Gao Qiang can feel 4 existences in this world. 3 of them are in the Far East. But the remaining one is very close to me. He was even rushing towards where he was. At this rate, it wouldn't take more than a few days for that guy to appear in front of him. It seems that the elves have already set their sights on him. Gao Qiang sneered. The characteristics of mutual induction between the Sephirot of Kabbalah or the reversal of Kabbalah mean that it is impossible for high-strength people to avoid their perception. I just don't know what expression the source carrier who came here will have when he sees me in a few days. He glanced at Sasha beside him. Gao Qiang suddenly had an idea. Juluo was idle while cooking, so why not go and see the defense facilities of this era? Rubbing Sasha's hair, Gao Qiang asked directly, "Sasha, do you know how to get to the Forgotten River?" Forgotten River. Sasha seemed to have just reacted, with a look of sudden enlightenment on her face. "That's right, you have to cross the river to catch the divine chicken." Calculated the difficulty of crossing the Forgotten River. Then Sasha looked uninterested. "It's so troublesome, I don't want to move." Gao Qiang laughed dumbly. Between starving to death and lazy death, Sasha actually chose all of them. I don't know if it should be considered a rare thing. But then, Sasha's eyes turned, as if she remembered something, and suddenly regained her spirit. After coughing twice, Sasha straightened up. "But if the Lord is interested, I can take him for a walk. Just think of it as a way to digest food before dinner." Oh. Although he didn't know what bad idea Sasha had come up with, Gao Qiang still gladly accepted Sasha's suggestion to lead the way. He followed Sasha out of the Lord's Hall. Perhaps because there was no Stonehenge in this era, everyone was staying in the house, and Gao Qiang didn't meet any people along the way. It wasn't until they walked for a while and came to a river with a faint green mist that Gao Qiang saw the shadow of a living thing. It was a baby girl. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 88. She looked less than 1.5 meters tall and was wearing a long patterned skirt. For some reason, the water in the river in front of her seemed very calm, with no ebb and flow. Therefore, even though she was sitting on a rock by the water, her clothes were not stained by the water droplets at all. The girl was holding a fishing rod in her hand. Because her height did not match the size of the fishing rod, she looked inexplicably cute. Suddenly, the girl pulled the fishing rod with her hand, and a column of water appeared from the river. "Wow, did you catch a big fish?" Sasha asked subconsciously. However, a few seconds later, seeing the creature thrown to the shore, Sasha shook her head in disappointment. It turned out to be an inedible human. Gao Qiang looked over. The person who was caught was dressed quite uniquely. She was wearing a snow-white robe soaked in water, and a hairpin embroidered with patterns on her head. Even if it was soaked in the river water, it never fell off her head. It's not that because of the river water, the closed-eyed woman has a bit more beauty. Obviously, Sasha didn't have the artistic cells to appreciate this beauty, and stepped directly over the unconscious woman. Puff. Feeling the pressure on her stomach, the unconscious woman sprayed out a tiny stream of water. At the same time, Gao Qiang also checked the panel of the unconscious woman. It can't be checked, it seems that she is not a subject of the fallen empire. However, just when Gao Qiang was distracted for a few seconds, Sasha rushed forward and hugged the fishing girl's thigh. "Sister Wang Chuan, I beg you for a favor." Hearing the word Wang Chuan, Gao Qiang suddenly became alert. If he remembered correctly, the defense measure he wanted to see this time was Wang Chuan River. But the strange thing is that Gao Qiang can even see the panel of data delete. Facing the little girl in front of him, who was called Wang Chuan by Sasha, Gao Qiang couldn't see the attribute panel. I don't know if it's because she is not considered as Gao Qiang's subject, or there are other reasons. At this time, Sasha was still shaking the other's thigh. Good sister, help me cross the river, I'll catch a chicken and share it with you. Wang Chuan just lowered his head with empty eyes and glanced at Sasha. Then he ignored Sasha, turned his eyes away and looked at the woman who had just caught the fish. He looked at the woman, and then at the fishing rod in his hand. Wang Chuan suddenly picked up the fishing rod and threw it into the river. Before Gao Qiang could think about why, the river suddenly began to surge, and there was a sound of bang, as if the fishing rod hit something hard. Then Wang Chuan looked at the center of the river with empty eyes again. The thick fog on the river dissipated little by little, and a fleet of rafts was almost arriving before he knew it. Your defense facilities, Wang Chuan River, hostile targets have been found, and you are being warned. Gao Qiang suddenly received a prompt from the war game. But this prompt came a little too late. The fleet has arrived and is about to approach the shore. According to the information given by the saint, among the many chaotic believers of gods in the West, when believers of different gods meet, in most cases, there is only one way to fight to the death. Even from the barbarians dressed in strange clothes on the fleet, Gao Qiang can't see the appearance of the war game lord at all. Seeing the appearance of this fleet, Shasha let go of Wang Chuan's legs, stood up and stuck in front of Gao Qiang, looking like she wanted to protect Gao Qiang. Shasha's actions were naturally seen by the guys dressed as barbarians on the fleet. Then Gao Qiang heard the sound of laughter coming from the river bank. Jili Gilu, Wabi Babu. Although it looks like a human, it is completely incomprehensible what error the other party is speaking. Gao Qiang finally confirmed that the barbarians on these dozens of rafts are really the kind of barbarians he thought. They have nothing to do with the lord of the war game. At this moment, Sasha took 2 steps back, leaned close to Gao Qiang's ear, and whispered, "Lord, they are scolding you." After listening to a few more words, Sasha continued, "They said that, Lord, you are delicate and tender, not as good as their women. Oh, now they are talking about why Wang Chuan is so short, like a bean sprout. It can be seen with the naked eye that Wang Chuan, whose eyes are still empty, has 2 more blushes on her face. Well, they said that I dare to protect my man in front of them, so I am a man." "Stop, stop, stop, I know you understand, no need to translate anymore." Gao Qiang interrupted Sasha to continue translating what the savage said. "Really?" Sasha turned her head and showed a puzzled expression. "But they are negotiating with us." "Negotiating?" Gao Qiang became interested. What do those savages want to negotiate? Sasha turned her head and shouted a few words in a language that Gao Qiang couldn't understand. After hearing the other party's response of wanton laughter, she turned around and explained. "They said that the woman caught by Wang Chuan's sister is the saint of the snow god, and also the sacrifice they want to offer to the hunting god. If we don't meddle in other people's business, they swear in the name of the hunting god, they can hunt us a few days later." Gao Qiang looked at the shirtless barbarian on the raft. Is this the first time someone said they wanted to hunt him? In the Stone Age, such a barbaric period, Gao Qiang had never heard anyone dare to say the word hunt in his territory. How could this mythological era be more barbaric than the Stone Age? But since she said the word snow goddess, Shasha seemed to have thought of something. She trotted all the way from Gao Qiang to the unconscious woman. Shasha took out a water bag from her arms and put it on the unconscious woman's skin. After a series of operations that even the barbarians could not understand, Shasha suddenly took a sip of the water bag. "It's cold." Gao Qiang looked at Shasha's excited expression, as if she had found a new refrigerator. At this time, Shasha threw aside her attitude of protecting Gao Qiang. Hugging Wang Chuan's thigh again, Shasha pointed to the raft on the river. "Sister Wang Chuan, kill them all, okay?" "Good sister." Wang Chuan did not respond, but looked at Gao Qiang with empty eyes. "Kill them all," Gao Qiang said tentatively. For some reason, Wang Chuan's empty eyes looked exactly the same to Gao Qiang as the eyes of data deleted in the shrine. You have changed the defensive building, Wangchuan River to attack mode. The Wangchuan River will no longer allow living things to cross. Due to the influence of the old family, before you or data deleted die, the Wangchuan River will be permanently upgraded to a miracle building, fake. And just as Gao Qiang finished the sentence, a thick fog suddenly rose on the river. And Wangchuan sang a strange poem. By the Wangchuan River, laugh at the Wangchuan River, if you are destined to cross the Wangchuan River, if you are not destined to cross the Wangchuan River, the years will be cut off. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 89. Gradually, the voice from Wangchuan became harder and harder to understand. In the end, only the whispers of the ancient gods were left in the river. Just when the barbarians were at a loss, a few faint lights suddenly appeared in the fog on both sides of the river. Due to the thick fog, Gao Qiang could only vaguely see the ferryman who seemed to be holding a lantern. Your san value -1. God of hunting. Looking at the black shadows approaching the raft, several barbarians suddenly picked up the flying stone rope and threw it at the black shadow from a distance. This flying stone rope is the wisdom given by the god of hunting, and it is invincible when fighting against creatures with legs. Often, once you are caught by the flying stone rope, you can't move an inch, and you can't fly even if you have wings. If the power is strong enough, it is not impossible to kill the opponent. Under the gaze of the barbarians, the flying stone rope quickly hit the black shadow holding the lantern and knocked the black shadow off the flat boat. Strangely, there were no waves on the river surface. When the black shadow holding the lantern fell into the water, the boat under its feet also sank. Before the barbarians could cheer, in their horrified eyes, a boat reappeared in the depths of the thick fog. Unconvinced, they threw the flying stone rope again. But no matter how many times they smashed the black shadow into the lake, a new black shadow would emerge in the thick fog. Ghost. A word that had never been experienced before appeared in the barbarian's mind. At this time, he wanted to grab the flying stone rope again, but found that the flying stone rope had been thrown out. Their raft was not big to begin with, and they didn't need to carry too many flying stone ropes to catch a snow goddess. Who would have thought that such a strange thing would happen? At this time, a boat had approached the barbarian's raft. After getting close, the barbarian on the raft finally saw the other party's figure clearly. It was a guy completely covered in a black robe, with only a skinny arm holding a lantern. It didn't paddle the boat, it seemed that the boat was moving on the lake by itself. Suddenly, the ferryman raised his head. In the eyes of the barbarians on the raft, it was a terrifying picture. Hundreds of hideous eyeballs squirmed under the dark hood. Before anyone screamed, the thicker fog had completely covered the raft. The light of the lantern went out, the lake was still calm, and people outside had no idea what was going on. But the barbarians on the remaining rafts were already trembling. As believers of the hunting god, they had hunted many weak gods in this chaotic land in the west, and had never seen such a weird scene. Impossible. There is absolutely no such weird thing in this world. But whether they are willing to admit it or not, it has already happened in front of them. The lake surface covered with thick fog is like the bloody mouth of a monster, as if it is choosing people to eat. Just in the distance, another raft came into contact with the ferryman's boat and completely disappeared in the thick fog. The river surface can't stay any longer. Suddenly, a barbarian turned his eyes to the shore. They were very close to the shore, and there was only an unconscious snow goddess on the shore. As for the rest of the people, they were not worth mentioning. A bean sprout, a skinny man, and a woman who had no fighting ability at all. What a combination of old, weak, sick, and disabled people. As long as they get to the shore, they will be safe. As if confirming this, the remaining rafts paddled towards the shore desperately. From the expressions of those barbarians, at this moment, only fear of the river surface can be seen, and there is no arrogant attitude just now. During this period, the ferrymen seemed to be constantly approaching them. One raft after another disappeared in the thick fog because of the approach to the ferryman's boat. Until the final landing, the fleet, which originally had a large number of people, had been killed. The barbarian who escaped to the shore first looked at the lake with lingering fear. Then he looked at everyone viciously. When they saw Wang Chuan's empty eyes, the remaining barbarians suddenly felt their hearts tighten, as if they had encountered some natural enemy. They subconsciously clenched their hands, but they were empty. In order to escape from those strange ferrymen, they had thrown away all the weapons they could throw. Thinking of this, some barbarians were already shaken. Although they were still facing Gao Qiang and others vigilantly, their bodies had begun to retreat and slowly move towards the other side of the river bank. Wow! Looking at the direction where the barbarians were moving, Shasha suddenly cried out in surprise. After Guru drank a sip of ice water, he hurriedly pulled Gao Qiang and turned around. At this moment, Gao Qiang heard a rumble behind him, followed by a slight heat wave. Gao Qiang turned his head carefully. The barbarian who had just walked the farthest was blown into pieces with a loud bang. Large pools of blood and flesh fell on the bodies of other barbarians. At the place where the explosion just happened, there was still an unextinguished fire burning. The fire mine array was actually placed behind the Wangchuan River. So, Gao Qiang's eyelids twitched. Did Shasha just lead him to wade through a large minefield? Facing the death of his companion, the barbarian was stunned for a moment. Then all the fear finally turned into anger. They were not allowed to leave the river surface or the river bank. Their retreat was completely cut off. Wabi Babu. After shouting a slogan that Gao Qiang couldn't understand, the last few barbarians rushed towards the location of several people with empty hands. It seemed that they were ready to tear Gao Qiang and others apart with their bare hands. Bang! The head of a barbarian exploded like a watermelon. Then a large sound accompanied by fire came from behind the barbarian. The remaining barbarians didn't even have time to react, and fell to the ground with a head full of questions. What had just attacked them? Allah, it seems we are late. A voice full of apology came from the other side of the minefield. Then Gao Qiang saw a young man wearing leather armor walking directly from the minefield. Behind him, there were hundreds of hunters holding muskets, and there was still a trace of white smoke coming out of the muzzles. As he approached, the young man put his long gun behind his back, took out 2 pistols from his waist and shot at the barbarians on the ground. At the same time, he smiled gently at Gao Qiang and Shasha. Lord and Saint Lady are still playing by the river so late. There are quite a lot of cockroaches that have escaped recently. Have they disturbed everyone's fun? By Hexiu. Profession, Commander-in-Chief of Witch Hunters. Witch Hunters. Introduction, the end of the old times, the guns and fire in their hands once made the gods tremble. Features, mastery of firearms, mastery of mine-laying, light steps. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 90. Light in pace, this unit will not trigger any passive traps when not active. After a few more shots, bang bang. Bai Hexio had already walked up to Gao Qiang. No one is hurt, right? The gentle tone came from his mouth, and Bai Hexio chuckled and narrowed his eyes, as if he was caring for several protected children. She was so strong that she didn't feel anything, but Shasha came closer to Bai Hexio. Oh no, you're not older than me, why are you talking to your sister in this tone? Shasha poked Bai Hexio's face and said, come on, call me sister and listen. Elder sister. Bai Hexio gently patted Shasha's hand away and pulled out the gun from his waist. As the fastest man in the world, at this distance, It only takes 0.017 seconds for me to go from aiming to shooting. The muzzle of the gun was vaguely pointed at Shasha's chest, just as the atmosphere was getting colder. The gun in Bihexio's hand suddenly pointed in another direction, and he instantly opened the gun's safety. "Hey, that woman over there, you've had enough." Gao Qiang looked at the position where Bihexio's gun was pointing. The snow goddess, who had been fished up by Wang Chuan, didn't know if she was awakened by the landmines and gunshots just now. At this moment, he was watching blankly as the witch hunters prepared the corpses of the barbarians. Waves of cool air surged out from her body, giving the area a chill. Now I heard Bihexio's question. She just said sorry dully, and then the cold atmosphere disappeared without a trace. Hey, what are you doing?" Shasha snatched the gun from Bihexio's hand. Looking at Shasha's movements, Bihexio seemed a little confused. "What does this mean? It seems that we haven't allowed outsiders to approach us for tens of thousands of years, right?" At this time, the witch hunters had sorted out the pieces of the barbarian, put them in bags and dumped them directly into the Lethe River. The green river water was stained with a trace of blood, but it quickly disappeared. At this moment, a fishing rod slowly floated over from the river. Shasha looked towards Wang Chuan with pleading eyes. Wang Chuan just reached out to pick up the fishing rod and continued to sit by the river and catch fish. It seemed that nothing Gao Qiang and others said had anything to do with her. Gao Qiang looked at the snow goddess at this moment. She was still sitting there numbly, her eyes dull. After seeing the barbarian being cut into pieces and thrown into the river, his already bloodless face turned even paler. Shasha looked at the woman and then at Bihexio. Suddenly he stamped his foot angrily. "How can you assume her ethnicity?" "Ha!" Bihexio's smile twitched, and then he stepped forward and grabbed the snow god's saint. Without paying any attention to the other party's pale face, Bihexio caught her in front of Shasha. "My good sister, tell me what race she looks like." This. Shasha looked towards Gao Qiang for help. Gao Qiang scratched his head and didn't know how to answer the question. Bihexio sighed. "If you want to keep it, just say so. Whether you want to keep it or not is not a matter of your words, Lord." "Then, keep it." Facing the expectant eyes of Shasha on the side, Gao Qiang said hesitantly. "Okay." Shasha jumped up and snatched the snow god saint from Bihexio's hand. "That." After listening to the conversation of several people, the snow goddess spoke softly. "Thanks." Bihexio raised his eyebrows but said nothing. "I am Xueran, a saint under the title of Lord Snow God, one of the 9 major gods of the western region. If you don't mind, sir, the snow gods are willing to become subordinates of the gods you believe in. What do you think, sir?" At this moment, Wang Chuan inadvertently glanced sideways at Xueran. "I am a destined person, no wonder I can float on the Wang Chuan River." "Well, it probably has nothing to do with her fishing. Wang Chuan is full of determination about this." Having said this, Yukaran gently pinched her already soaked clothes. She was ready to wait for her fate to be judged. On this continent, Yukaran naturally knew how every believer of a god was hostile to other believers of gods. If the followers of both gods could live in harmony, it must be that one of them joined the other's pantheon and formed a subordinate relationship. The words "believer of the Lord God" really caught Gao Qiang's attention. If you are a believer of the Lord God, how could you be so embarrassed? After holding it in for a long time, Gao Qiang still managed to choke out the word embarrassed. Being chased by a group of barbarians, Yukazan was even called the saint of the snow god. Are the other believers of this main god too inferior? Hearing this, the light in Yukazan's eyes dimmed a bit. The followers of the snow god have been slaughtered. In Yukazan's description, the snow god's faction was besieged by a large number of followers of the primitive gods and ancestor gods, and was eventually divided up. It is said that there are shadows of the main gods in the east behind the scenes, and the gods such as holy light, life, and war seem to be involved. Gao Qiang nodded. He understood why, but he did not explain it out loud. In fact, it is not difficult to understand that the land in the east has been divided up. If all races are not ready for all-out war now, so the best way is to find a way to continue development and delay the time. And the large number of native gods and native believers in the West have become the best choice for war game players. If I agree to the subordinate relationship, what will happen next? Gao Qiang continued to ask. Xueran turned his head away, his voice trembling slightly. Next, the snow god will become a subordinate god of the god you believe in, and occupy a secondary position in the shrine of the god you believe in. For ordinary beasts that are worshipped as primitive gods, this may be considered a commendable thing. But for the main god, it is absolutely disrespectful blasphemy. But now, in order to maintain the belief in the snow god, Xueran has no other choice. The snow god requests to become a subordinate god of your faction. Do you agree? Agree. It's a harmless thing, and Sasha is still looking forward to it, so Gao Qiang will naturally not spoil the fun. At the moment when Gao Qiang agreed, Xueran seemed to be relieved. But then he lowered his head and fell silent. Her guilt towards God will not dissipate in a short time. Okay, I'll take you to eat something delicious later. Sasha is not very good at comforting people, so she can only try to think of something she likes. Suddenly, Sasha seemed to think of something. Oh, I remember it now. Seeing everyone looking at her, Sasha said directly, I remember the hunting god they just mentioned was a big python. Let's ask them to make snake soup for us, okay?